I never wanted to use my magic again. After my pack exiled me for possessing healing light they deemed too dangerous, I vowed to live quietly in this small forest cottage, alone and forgotten. But on my first night, as I reached beneath my bed for a fallen blanket, candlelight revealed something impossible. A werewolf pup, barely breathing, its silver fur matted with blood. My hands trembled as I knelt on the cold wooden floor. The pup's amber eyes met mine, filled with pain and fading hope. I knew what using my magic would mean. If anyone discovered I had healed again, the consequences could be worse than exile. My former pack had made their judgment clear. My light magic was unpredictable, uncontrollable, a threat to everyone around me. But as the pup whimpered, something inside me cracked. I could not let an innocent die to protect myself from fear. Golden light bloomed from my fingertips as I reached toward the trembling creature. The moment my magic touched its fragile body, warmth flooded the space between us. I poured everything I had into saving this life, knowing that this single act of compassion would change everything. Someone unexpected was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The cottage still smelled of strangers. Smoke from the hearth clung to the rafters, battling with the sharp tang of fresh-cut pine and damp earth. Wind sighed against the shutters like a restless spirit, testing the hooks, searching for a way in. Exile. The word echoed in my mind as I moved through the single room. A narrow bed pressed against the far wall, a small table, 2 stools, shelves lined with herbs I had brought in a bundle tied to my back. My entire life reduced to what I could carry. "You're safer alone," they had said. They meant we're safer without you. I set the candle stub on the bedside table, the tiny flame throwing long, uncertain shadows across the floorboards. Dangerous, they had called my magic. Unpredictable. I had promised myself that night in the council hall that I would never call the light again. If they wanted me gone, then I would bury the gift that frightened them. The bed creaked when I sat, tired muscles protesting as I unlaced my boots. The candle threw a small pool of gold against the quilt. I shifted, reaching for the wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed. It slipped from my grasp, tumbling to the floor and disappearing into the dark gap beneath the frame. "Of course," I muttered. With a sigh, I slid off the mattress, the floorboards cold against my knees. The candle's flame bent as I lifted it, stretching toward the emptiness under the bed. I lowered my head and peered into the darkness. 2 dull, amber sparks stared back. My breath snagged. Then the shape around the eyes resolved. A small muzzle, a black nose dry and cracked, silver fur clumped and darkened with blood and dirt, tiny paws tucked under a trembling body. A pup, a werewolf pup, no more than a few weeks old, crammed beneath my bed as if the wooden frame could shield it from the entire world. The candle shook in my hand. The pup flinched at the shift of light, a frail whimper escaping its throat. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, ragged jerks, each breath a battle it was losing. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. No answer, of course, only another weak sound, so small it barely disturbed the heavy air. I should have been angry at whoever had left it here. Instead, what flooded me was colder and sharper than anger. Fear, not of the pup, but of myself. If I touched it, the light would answer. It always did. And if anyone felt that flare, if even a whisper of what I had done reached my former pack, exile might be the kindest punishment they chose next time. I leaned back on my heels, forcing myself to breathe slowly. I could do nothing. Let nature take its course. Close my eyes and pretend I never saw those failing breaths. The pup's gaze followed me, glazed and unfocused, but still trying to hold on. The scent reached me then. Blood, fear, and beneath it all, a trace of milk and warmth. A child's scent. I had held pups like this before, smiled as they tumbled across clinic floors. watched mothers weep with relief after my light eased fevers and healed broken limbs. The council had praised me once, long before they decided my gift had grown too strong, too strange. "You will bring ruin down on us," my alpha had hissed that last night. "There will be no more of your experiments." The pup shuddered, a thin whine slipping out, and the memory shattered. "Breathe," I whispered, not sure if I spoke to the pup or to myself. Its chest hitched, stilled, hitched again, weaker. My choice narrowed to a blade's edge. If I turned away now, no one would know. I could wrap its little body in a blanket, bury it beneath the pines, and convince myself I had done all I could. But that was a lie, and I had told myself enough of those to last a lifetime. The truth pressed hot behind my eyes as I crawled closer. The pup tried to recoil, and could not. Its eyes fluttered shut, then dragged open again with effort, as if some stubborn piece of its spirit refused to surrender. "I know," I whispered. "I know it hurts." My hand hovered in the air, inches from its matted fur. The light stirred, sensing need, tasting it. Heat curled in my chest like a waking creature. I thought of the council's faces, pale and hard under torchlight. Of the way my alpha's voice had cracked, not with pity but fear, when he pronounced my sentence. Then I looked at the pup. Its breaths were no longer jerks. They were pauses with effort in between, each one slower than the last. I could walk away, or I could be the person I had always been before fear twisted my reflection. My fingers closed the last of the distance. The moment my skin brushed its fur, the light broke free. It surged up my arm in a rush of heat, burning and sweet like sunlight after endless winter. My vision blurred at the edges as the cottage fell away. There was only the pup and the dark knot of pain binding its little body. I pressed my palm more firmly against its side, leaning into the connection. "Stay with me," I murmured. "Please." Golden brightness flooded from my chest, down my arm, into the pup. I felt torn flesh knitting, ribs realigning, bruised lungs drawing in air more smoothly. Bones sang under my touch, vibrating with the echo of life returning. The effort ripped through me like a storm, tugging at every thread of strength I had left. Memories flickered in the light. Not mine, but the pup's. A larger shape snarling above it. Cold mud, running feet, a desperate scramble into the nearest shelter. "Safe," I whispered, though my voice shook. "You're safe." The world narrowed further, edges dimming. My heart hammered once, twice, then slowed as the light demanded more. I gave it freely, pouring grief, anger, and all the love I had tried so hard to bury into that tiny, trembling frame. Tears slid down my cheeks, falling onto the floorboards in silent drops. "Just a little more," I begged. Then, beneath my hand, something changed. The frantic flutter of the pup's heartbeat steadied. Its breathing deepened. Each inhale smoother, less fragile. Warmth spread under my palm, pushing back the chill that had clung to its skin. The tight knot of pain loosened, dissolving into warmth and exhausted relief. The light, satisfied, began to recede, curling back into the hollow behind my ribs. I let it go with a shuddering exhale, every muscle trembling. The cottage came back into focus. The low ceiling, the crackle of the fire, the guttering candle now just a stub of wax. I sagged onto my side, breath sawing in and out of my chest. For a moment all I could do was lie there on the floorboards, listening. The pup was breathing. Not the ragged gasps from before, but slow, even breaths. I pushed myself up on, pushed, shaking elbows, and drew it gently out from under the bed. It was lighter than it had any right to be. Fresh pink scars traced its flank, where open wounds had been moments before. Its eyes were closed now, lashes resting peacefully against its fur. It made a soft sound as I cradled it against my chest. Not a whimper, but a sigh. "Your trouble already," I murmured, sinking back until my shoulders pressed against the side of the bed. "You know that, little one?" It didn't answer. It only nestled closer, nose burrowing into the crook of my arm, as if I had always been safe, always been home. Exhaustion rolled over me in heavy waves. My limbs felt made of wet sand. I should have lifted us both onto the mattress. Should have thought of what would happen when dawn came and someone realized I had broken my vow. Instead, I stayed where I was, sitting on the floor with my back to the bed and the pup sleeping against my heart. The candle died with a faint hiss, plunging the cottage into darkness. My eyelids drifted shut as sleep dragged me under. One thought circled in the quiet, relentless as the wind outside. I had saved a life, and the world would not let that go unanswered. By the second morning, the cottage almost felt like it belonged to us. The pup followed me from hearth to table on clumsy paws, nosing at my skirts, collapsing in sudden heaps of sleep wherever a patch of sunlight found the floorboards. I tried not to name him. Names made things real. Names were promises. So I called him Little One and Trouble, and pretended that wasn't the same as claiming him. "Stay out of the herbs," I scolded gently as he sniffed at the woven baskets by the hearth. He looked back at me, head tilting, ears too big for his round face. Then, with all the solemnity of a prince accepting a crown, he toppled onto his side and went to sleep on my bare feet. Warmth seeped through my bones. On the second afternoon, rain drummed against the roof. I stirred a pot of broth over the fire, glancing down every few moments to make sure the pup hadn't wandered too close to the flames. He lay on his back, paws splayed, snoring softly. "This is temporary," I told myself. "He'll heal. And then what?" I nearly dropped the bowl when a sound split the steady rhythm of rain. A knock. Not the hesitant tapping of a traveler seeking shelter, but 3 measured, resonant blows that made the doorframe shiver. The pup shot upright, ears pricked, a low, uncertain sound rumbling in his chest. My pulse lurched hot and fast. No one should be here. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I had not heard, but those 3 knocks had not been a request. They had been a summons. "Who is it?" I called, proud that my voice only trembled a little. Silence for a heartbeat. Then a reply, deep and clear, carrying easily through the wood. "Mira, daughter of Cassian. Open the door." He spoke my name the way a judge might read it from a scroll, formally, stripped of affection. The pup whined softly, his small body pressed harder against my leg. I swallowed. Only one kind of wolf spoke with that authority. The Alpha King. My fingers tightened on the latch. I considered for a brief, wild moment pretending to be someone else, but lies would not hold against a king's gaze. I lifted the latch and pulled the door open. He filled the doorway like a storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in travel-worn leathers that did nothing to soften the sheer force of his presence. Dark hair, damp from the rain, clung to his temples, and droplets glittered on the wolf fur cloak fastened at his throat. His eyes, gray, sharp, assessing, swept over me once before dropping to the small shape half hidden behind my skirts. The air seemed to thin between one breath and the next. He looked younger than I had expected, perhaps 30 winters at most. But there was nothing untested about him. Power coiled around him like a second cloak, invisible but unmistakable. "Your Majesty," I managed, lowering my gaze out of instinct more than respect. "May I come in?" he asked. It was phrased as a question, but we both knew the answer did not matter. Still, something rebellious and wounded in me straightened. "This cottage is mine," I said quietly. "For now, at least." A pause. Then, to my surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Then, as your guest, I ask permission." Rain pattered more insistently on the roof. The pup nudged my leg again, sensing the tension but not understanding its shape. I stepped back. "Very well. Come in, Your Majesty." He crossed the threshold without hesitation. The room seemed smaller with him inside it. I closed the door, suddenly acutely aware of the clutter. The herbs hanging in bundles, the single bed, the extra blanket folded in the corner where the pup usually slept. His eyes swept the space once, taking in everything, then settled on the pup. The small wolf stared back, tail tucked, but head lifted, as if trying to decide whether to be brave or afraid. Then the king knelt. The Alpha King, ruler of the Central Packs, dropped to one knee on my worn floorboards and extended his hand toward the pup, palm up. He did not reach to grab, did not command. He simply waited. The pup sniffed, inching forward, paws silent on the wood. After a moment, he pressed his nose against the king's fingers. Relief flashed across the king's face, quick and fierce, before his expression smoothed again. "He is alive," the king said, more to himself than to me. "Thank the moon." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "How did you know he was here?" His gaze lifted to mine, steady and unflinching. "Because something impossible tore across my territory 2 nights ago," he said. "I felt it. Every alpha did. A flare of healing magic strong enough to bend the wind." My mouth went dry. "We would have sent scouts in any case," he continued. "But then I caught this little one's scent tangled in it." His hand brushed lightly over the pup's healed side. "One of my missing." Missing? The word snagged in my thoughts. "He is yours?" I asked. "He is my responsibility," the king answered. "My brother's son." A shadow crossed his features, there, and gone again. "He disappeared during an attack on one of our outer patrols. We thought—" His jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter what we thought. You changed that." I stared at the pup, at the faint pink line where torn flesh had once gaped. My light. His nephew. A king's attention crashing like a wave into the quiet shore of my exile. "I didn't know," I said softly. "I found him here, hiding under my bed." "And you healed him?" Not a question. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Yes. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "My pack exiled me for that magic," I added, because he deserved the whole truth. "They called it dangerous, unpredictable. I swore I would never use it again." "Yet you did," the king said. "There was a dying child under my bed." My voice sharpened, shame burned away by the memory. I could not pretend I hadn't seen him. Something in his expression shifted, a small easing at the corners of his eyes. "Good," he said simply. The single word stole the air from my lungs. "Good?" I repeated. "You broke your vow," he said, "to save a life. I would call that an improvement over vows that let a child die to preserve pride." I had braced for anger, suspicion, a lecture on laws and boundaries. Instead, he offered approval. It left me more off balance than any threat would have. "You are not afraid?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Of what I did? Of what I am?" His gaze flicked once to the herbs, the neat stacks of folded cloth, the carefully tended fire. "I'm cautious," he said. "Any power that can heal like that can likely harm just as deeply. But fear—" He shook his head. "No. Fear is for those who see only what might go wrong, never what might be made right." The pup chose that moment to butt his head insistently against my calf. The king's mouth softened. "You saved my nephew," he said. "Whatever your past, whatever your exile, that is a debt I cannot ignore." My throat tightened. "I did not do it for a debt, Your Majesty." "I know," his voice lowered, gentler, "which is why it matters." He rose smoothly to his feet, gathering the pup into his arms with surprising ease. The small wolf relaxed against his chest as if this were familiar. "I must take him home," the king said. "His parents are waiting." The word carried more weight than it should, but I was too busy trying to steady myself to examine it. "You will be careful?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He looked genuinely taken aback. "With him? Always." No, I said. With yourself. Whoever hurt him may try again. For the first time, something like real warmth lit his eyes. You worry for a king you've known for less than an hour? I worry for anyone who carries a child like that, I said quietly. His gaze held mine for a long heartbeat. Then he inclined his head, a gesture that felt dangerously close to respect. I will be careful, he promised. He stepped toward the door. The pup nestled against him, tiny claws hooked in the leather of his tunic. Panic fluttered in my chest, sudden and sharp. Wait, I blurted. He paused, hand on the latch. His side, I said, voice barely steady. If the scar darkens, if he begins to limp or cough, send word. The healing was rushed. I gave all I could, but some injuries take longer to understand. The king considered me for a moment, then nodded once. I will, he said. And Mira? Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you. The words were simple, but they landed with unexpected force. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant smoke. For a moment he stood there, rain needling his hair, the pup safe in his hold. Then he shifted, the faintest hint of a smile touching his mouth. He seems fond of you, he said. If he grows strong, I may bring him to visit. If you wish. The offer hurt more than a clean break. I would like that, I whispered. He inclined his head once more and walked into the rain, disappearing between the trees. I watched until the forest swallowed them both. When I closed the door, the cottage felt unbearably quiet. I crossed to the empty space where the pup had slept beside the hearth, sinking to my knees and pressing my palm flat to the still warm floorboards. He is safe, I told the silence. He is home. But as the rain softened to a drizzle, another thought coiled beneath the reassurance, quiet and relentless. The Alpha King had felt my magic. He had followed it, and whatever exile I thought I had chosen for myself, the world beyond these walls had just reminded me that it still knew my name. 4 days after the king left, the cottage forgot how to breathe. Silence pulled in the corners like standing water. No small paws pattered across the floor. No clumsy snout nudged my elbow while I worked. I found myself turning again and again to speak to someone who was no longer there. By the 4th evening, storm clouds had swallowed the sky. I banked the fire and sat at the small table, grinding feverfew leaves in a mortar just for something to do. The first knock I almost ignored, convinced it was the wind. The second shook the door hard enough to rattle the latch. I wiped my hands on my apron and rose, crossing to the door. The king filled the doorway again, but this time the storm was behind him as well as in him. Rain streaked his hair and cloak, shadows carved deep lines around his eyes. In his arms, wrapped in a familiar wool blanket, the pup squirmed and wailed, a thin, keening sound that scraped raw across my nerves. Mira, the king said, and his voice, steady the last time we met, was frayed at the edges. I need your help. The pup's cry broke on a shallow sob. My heart lurched. Come in, I said, stepping aside without insisting on courtesy this time. He crossed the threshold in 2 long strides. The moment the door closed behind him, the pup's nose lifted, frantic, scenting the air. The sound it made shifted from a wild wail to something smaller, questioning. It's all right, I murmured. The king's gaze flicked to my face, then back to the wriggling bundle. He hasn't been, he said quietly. Not truly. He laid the pup on my bed as gently as if he were made of spun glass. The blanket fell back enough to reveal 2 prominent ribs beneath soft fur. 4 days should not have been enough to change him so much. I moved toward him as if pulled by a string. What happened? Was he injured again? No. The word came out like a curse. That's the problem. He is not sick, not according to every healer in my palace. The pup turned his head toward me, eyes unfocused but searching. His cries faltered into hiccuping whines, each one weaker than the last. "From the moment we left your cottage," he cried, the king said. "At first we thought it was the journey, the shock. But he did not stop. Day, night, he screamed until his throat went raw. His jaw tightened. I held him until my arms shook. My sister did the same. He pushed away from all of us." Guilt stabbed under my ribs. "You should have told me sooner." "I thought he would settle," he admitted, "that he only needed time." His gaze dropped to the pup's narrow chest. By the second day, he refused to eat. By the third, he would not sleep unless someone wrapped him in this. He brushed a hand over the blanket. My blanket, the one I had grabbed off the bed to shield him while he lay on the cold floor, light pouring through him. Realization washed through me, slow and heavy. "He calms when he smells this?" I asked. "For a little while," the king said. "But the moment we remove it, or the scent fades even a little, he wakes and begins again." The pup nudged my wrist with his nose, inhaling deeply. The frantic edge left his whining. His tail gave a weak, hopeful twitch. "What did your healers say?" "That there is no poison in his blood, no broken bone, no fever. His lungs are clear. His heart is strong." The king's hands clenched at his sides. "They have no more answers to give me. And you?" I kept my eyes on the pup. "I have one answer," he said. "I simply do not know what to do with it." The pup made a small noise then, a sound that snagged my attention more keenly than any argument. He breathed out, just that, 2 broken syllables, but they echoed through the room like thunder. "Mira." My throat closed. "Did you hear?" the king asked, voice low. "Perhaps it was nothing," I said. "A coincidence." "He has been making that sound for 2 days," the king said. "My sister swears it is a name." He took a step closer, exhaustion laid bare in his eyes. "But he is not calling a ghost, is he?" The pup head-butted my hand again, impatient. My heart answered before my mind could catch up. I sank onto the edge of the bed, lifting him carefully into my arms. The moment his small body settled against my chest, he sighed and went limp with relief. The dreadful tension that had strung through him like wire eased all at once. "I think," I said slowly, "he is calling me." The king exhaled as if someone had removed a blade from between his ribs. "So do I," he said. For a few breaths, we simply watched the pup's sides rise and fall. His eyes had already drifted closed. "You see why I came," the king said at last. "Yes." My fingers stroked absently over the healed scar. "But I do not understand why it is like this." "Is it because of your magic?" he asked. "Maybe." The word tasted uncertain. "When I healed him, the light went deep, deeper than I meant it to. I poured everything I had into him." I hesitated. Sometimes when a healer touches a patient that closely a connection forms, but it has never been like this. "A bond," the king murmured. "Yes, but bonds do not usually starve a child of comfort from everyone else." He considered that, pacing one slow step away, then back. "I do not know what he needs," he said quietly. "Only that when he is away from you, he declines. And when he is near you, he breathes like this. Steady, peaceful, safe." The pup nuzzled closer into the hollow beneath my collarbone. "What are you asking of me, Your Majesty?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He did not stand tall this time, did not cloak his request in command. Instead, he came to stand in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint shadows under his eyes. "I am asking you," he said, "to come with me to the palace. For a time, until we understand what this is, and how to ease it." His gaze dropped to the pup, then back to me. "He is fading, Mira. Not because he is sick, but because something in him has decided he cannot live without you." My first instinct was to recoil. Palace, courts, counselors whose opinions could shape lives. I imagined their faces when they learned who I was. An exiled healer with a history of magic that frightened her own pack. "You know what they will say," I whispered. "Your people, your advisors, they will call me dangerous." "Some already do," he said with a wryness that surprised me. "They called you dangerous the moment they felt your power flare." His expression sobered. "But this is my kingdom, my decision. And I will not let fear dictate whether a child lives or dies." I looked down at the pup, at the small, warm weight most would not think twice about losing. Yet to the king, to the family who waited in some distant palace, he was everything. And to me, he was the first living creature in months to look at me as if I were not a monster, but a harbor. "You could find another way," I said faintly. "Another healer, another solution." "I have tried," he answered. "All I have accomplished is making him suffer longer." He dropped to one knee, bringing his gaze level with mine. "I am not asking as a king now. I am asking as an uncle who does not know how to stop his nephew from starving himself from grief." The honesty in his eyes undid me more thoroughly than any command could have. Fear whispered of council chambers, and old accusations dragged into new light. But another voice spoke louder. The one that had driven me to place my hands on a dying pup despite my vow. If I refused, he would leave. He would carry the pup back to a palace where he would cry himself hoarse and waste away. If I went, everything might change again. I tightened my hold, feeling the steady thrum of the pup's heart against my ribs. "I have nothing the world has not already taken," I said quietly. "If my presence can help him live, then I cannot say no." Relief crashed over the king's features, raw and unmasked. "Thank you," he said, and the words shook. "You will not be alone there. I give you my word." Promises from kings were dangerous things. Yet something in his tone, some blend of steel and gentleness, made me believe he would break himself against his own walls before breaking that vow. "When do we leave?" I asked. "As soon as you are ready," he replied. "Every hour matters." I looked around the cottage, my few bundles of herbs, the bed that still held the indent of my solitary sleep. It had never truly become home. Not the way 4 days with a pup had. "I will need only a little time," I said. "Some herbs, clothes, bandages. The rest can wait." He rose, inclining his head in acknowledgement. "I will see to the horses." I gathered what I needed with quick, efficient movements, the pup remaining nestled in one arm, unwilling to be put down even for a heartbeat. As I tied the last satchel and slung it over my shoulder, I paused in the doorway, looking back once more. "Goodbye," I whispered. The cottage said nothing. I stepped out into the rain, the pup's fur soaking up the droplets, his nose tucked under my chin. The king helped me onto the horse as if I were something breakable he refused to see shattered. When he mounted his own, our gazes met over the space between us. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I am coming anyway." A small smile ghosted across his lips. "That will be enough." We rode out together, leaving the cottage behind. The pup dozed against my heart, breath steady, as if he had finally made his choice. And without quite meaning to, I had made mine. The palace rose out of the mist like something from an old prayer. Stone towers crowned with banners, high walls slick with rain, torchlight burning in golden veins along the battlements. As our horses passed beneath the iron portcullis, all I could do was grip the pup and stare. The courtyard stones were so smooth they shone, and the air hummed with wolves, guards, servants, messengers, moving with practiced purpose. Every eye turned to us, or rather, to me. I felt their gazes like pricks of ice along my skin, heard the whispers rising in our wake. "That must be her, the one with the light. They exiled her, didn't they? For dangerous magic." The words threaded through the clatter of hooves and the hiss of rain. I tried to keep my shoulders straight, my head level, but old shame stirred heavy and familiar. The pup shifted restlessly in my arms, sensing my tension. I bent my head, murmuring nonsense against his fur until his breathing steadied again. The king swung down from his horse and reached up to help me dismount. His hand closed around my elbow, steady and warm. "They talk," he said under his breath, "because they do not yet know you. Let them. Their opinions will catch up to the truth." Inside, the palace swallowed us whole. The entrance hall soared upward into shadow, its arched ceiling painted with silver wolves running across a midnight sky. Tapestries lined the walls, battles won, treaties signed, kings crowned, all watching us pass with woven eyes. Grand, yes. Overwhelming, absolutely. But beneath the beauty lay edges. Guards at every archway, counselors clustered in alcoves, with eyes like hawks. "Your Majesty." A man stepped forward from a cluster near the far stair. He was older than the king, his hair iron gray, his posture stiff with authority. "Lord Cassius," the king acknowledged. "You have been busy these last days," Cassius replied smoothly. His gaze slid to me, cool and assessing. "We felt your return, sire. And something else. I see now what it was." His attention snagged on the pup tucked against my chest. "This is the child?" Cassius asked. "My nephew," the king said, a hint of warning beneath the words. Cassius inclined his head slightly. "We are grateful he is found." Then, after a beat too long, "And the healer?" Not my name. Just a role wrapped in all the rumors they had gathered. "Mira," the king corrected, the word firm as a stone placed between us. "She has agreed to help us understand what binds her to the pup." "Of course," Cassius's politeness thinned at the edges. "The council will wish to discuss the implications of that bond. And of her presence here." "Later," the king said. "For now, she and the child need rest." A faint muscle jumped in Cassius's jaw, but he bowed. "As you command, sire." We moved on. At last we stopped before a carved wooden door painted with a running wolf and a crescent moon. Even before the king opened it, I knew what room lay beyond. The nursery. The moment the door swung inward, the pup tensed. From inside came the thin, rasping cry I had grown used to hearing only in memory. In the cradle near the window, another pup thrashed, wrapped in my blanket. Not another? I realized with a jolt. The same. I had left with him in my arms. I returned to find some echo left behind. A scent ghost, a comfort that no longer comforted. A woman stood over the cradle, exhausted eyes shadowed, hands hovering helplessly above the wailing child. When she saw the king, her shoulders sagged with something like relief and fear braided together. "He will not stop," she whispered. "I do not know what else to—" Her gaze found me. Hope flickered there, sharp and desperate. The king stepped aside. "Let her," he said. For one heartbeat, the room held its breath. The pup in my arms lifted his head. His twin in the cradle stilled mid-cry, nose flaring. Then, with a sound that was almost a sob, the child in the cradle lurched toward the edge, tiny hands grasping air. "Mira!" he choked. The pup in my arms answered with a high, desperate whine. I did not remember deciding to move, only that suddenly I was at the cradle, transferring the pup I'd carried into it and lifting the other out. We swapped them like matched halves of something broken, and the world clicked. The crying stopped. Just stopped. The pup pressed now. Against my chest let out a trembling sigh, burrowing into the hollow beneath my chin. His body, strung tight as a bowstring moments before, went boneless, with relief. Within heartbeats, his breathing steadied into the slow, even rhythm of true sleep. Silence rang louder than the wails had. I sagged onto the nearby rocking chair because my legs would not hold me upright. The woman, the king's sister, I realized, covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. "I tried," she whispered. I held him. I sang. But he never— No one could, the king said quietly. Until now. He stood just inside the nursery door, one shoulder resting against the frame. His expression was complicated. Wonder, yes. Concern, absolutely. And something else, softer and more dangerous, threaded through both. He wasn't looking at the pup. He was looking at me. Weeks became months. The pup, whom everyone called Little Wolf for now, grew stronger each day. The king came often, sometimes full leathers, fresh from the training grounds, sometimes in soft shirts with ink-stained fingers. Each time his shoulders loosened a fraction when he stepped into the nursery and saw us there. He has grown, the king said one evening, dropping wearily into the chair opposite mine. You said that yesterday, I replied. It was true yesterday. It is truer now. We fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. I measured out herbs and stitched bandages. He learned which salves stung by the set of the pup's ears. In the afternoons, when the pup napped, the king asked questions. Where does the light come from? I don't know. It's like asking where breath comes from. It just is. He listened, truly listened, as I laid bare every aspect of my craft. In return, he explained pack law, how treaties were woven, how one frayed thread could weaken the whole. The council fears what they cannot predict, he said one evening. I do not blame them for that, but I will not let fear be the only voice in the room. He proved it again and again. I heard the argument sometimes, muffled through council chamber doors. Words like precedent and risk floated out on sour air. The king's voice cut through all of them, calm, implacable. Mira stays. This is not up for debate. I should have been frightened by how much of his reputation he was staking on me. Instead, a strange warmth took root behind my ribs, growing each time he chose the harder path. In the evenings, we returned to the nursery, or sometimes to the small sitting room adjoining my chambers. Little Wolf would sprawl across cushions, gnawing on a carved bone, while the king and I reviewed herb inventories, or discussed the latest council maneuver. I began to see the man beneath the crown. He laughed more easily in private. He apologized when he snapped and meant it. With the pup, he was nothing like the austere alpha king the court whispered about. He rolled on the floor, let Little Wolf chew on his hair, and made ridiculous growling noises that sent the child into fits of delighted yips. He will never respect you if you let him win every wrestling match, I warned one night as the king lay on his back, feigning defeat. He will respect that I know when to yield, the king replied, eyes crinkling. It is a skill many forget. I watched him then, the easy affection in his hands, the way his entire face softened when the pup swiped a wet tongue across his nose. Something shifted inside me, subtle but sure. Gratitude blurred into admiration. Admiration melted into something deeper, warmer, more dangerous. I found myself wondering what it would feel like to have those hands cut my face, to have that softened gaze turned on me alone. Then I would shove the thought away, scolding myself for daring such foolishness. He was a king. I was an exile he had chosen to shelter. The gulf between us still yawned wide. At night, when the palace lay quiet and Little Wolf snored at my feet, I lay awake and replayed small moments. The king's hand closing over mine when a counselor's words cut too close. The way his gaze sought mine first when entering a room. The one time his fingers brushed a stray curl from my face, entirely by accident, and both of us froze for a heartbeat too long. Each memory sent a ripple of heat through me, followed by a cold wash of doubt. He trusts you, I reminded myself. He respects you. That is already more than you ever expected. Wanting more felt greedy, unfair, dangerous. So I held that longing where I held the light, in the quiet hollow behind my ribs, where it could burn without consuming. Yet sometimes when the pup had finally collapsed between us in a tangle of limbs, and the fire cast soft gold over the king's profile, I caught an echo of my own conflict in his eyes. a question he was not yet willing to ask aloud. We were growing closer, step by cautious step, word by carefully chosen word. I told myself that when the day came that the pup no longer needed me, I would leave with Grace. I did not yet know that Grace has little to do with love, and even less with the choices fate was quietly arranging for us both. The summons arrived at dawn, tucked beneath my breakfast cup like a snake under a stone. By order of the High Council, it read, "The healer Mira is requested to attend a formal inquiry regarding her continued presence within the royal palace." Little Wolf nosed the parchment, sneezed, and trotted off with a chunk of bread in his mouth, blissfully unconcerned. The king found me in the nursery, the summons still folded in my hand. His eyes flicked to the seal, then to my face. "They didn't even wait for the ink to dry," he muttered. "You knew this was coming," I said. "I did." He took the parchment, barely glancing at the words before tearing it cleanly in two. "But they do not summon you. I do. And I asked you here long before they found the courage to put quill to paper." "That courage now has teeth," I replied quietly. "If I refuse to attend, they will say I have something to hide." His jaw worked, anger flickering behind his eyes. Then he exhaled. "Very well. Then we go together." The council chamber was built to make wolves feel small. High ceilings arched overhead, painted with snarling wolves and blood-red moons. The long stone table curved in a half-circle, council members seated like judges at some ancient trial. Whispers rippled through the room as the king and I entered side by side. "That's her. The light-bearer they cast out." I felt each word like grit against my skin. At the center sat Lord Cassius, spine straight as a spear. "Your Majesty," he said, "thank you for honoring our request for counsel." "This is not counsel," the king replied. "This is a hearing you wish to hold about a woman who can hear every word you say about her." A few counselors shifted uneasily. "We are concerned," Cassius said simply. "It is our duty to bring those concerns to you, and to her." His gaze pinned me, cool and sharp. "Mira, formerly of Cassian's pack. We have heard many stories about you, that your magic is untested and unstable, that your former pack exiled you for practices they deemed dangerous." A murmur of agreement rolled through the chamber. "We are charged with the safety of this kingdom," another counselor added. "We cannot ignore an unknown variable in its heart." Unknown variable. I felt my fingers curl against my skirts. The king's voice cut across the whispers. "She is not a variable. She is a person. You will remember that when you speak of her in my presence." Cassius inclined his head, acknowledging the rebuke without retreating. "Then let us speak plainly. We question whether it is wise to allow a healer with her history unrestricted access to our future heir, or to you." He left hanging the accusation they didn't quite dare voice, that I might be twisting the king's choices with the same light eye used to heal. The king's gaze slid to me, asking silently for patience. I nodded once. "Let us examine your concerns," he said, stepping down from the raised dais to stand among them. "One by one. You say her magic is unproven. Yet you sit in a fortress whose wounded were saved by whose herbs, whose training kept infection at bay." Silence. "As for her exile," the king went on, "we have only one side of that tale, the side of those who cast her out. I have heard the other. A healer begged to perform a miracle, punished when she succeeded too well." He gestured to the chamber doors. "If you doubt her skill, ask the farmers whose sick children now run through the fields because she chose to treat them. Ask the stable master whose mare would have died foaling if not for her light. They are here." I turned, startled, to see faces I recognized in the gallery above. A farmer couple, the stable master, 2 guards whose shattered ribs I had mended. "I called for character, witnesses," the king said. "Not from courts or councils, but from those whose lives have changed because she was here. Do you wish to hear them?" One by one they spoke. She didn't ask whose pack I'd been born into. Only what hurt. My daughter had been sick for weeks. Our own healer did what he could, but the fever wouldn't break. Mira sat up all night with her, and by morning, the fever was gone. Their words tightened my throat. When their testimonies faded, Cassius folded his hands. No one disputes she has been useful, but usefulness is not the same as safety. You cannot deny that the bond between her and your nephew is unprecedented. She hasn't left, the king said, and she won't until he no longer needs her. That is her choice, not mine. His gaze swept the table. You fear that I am compromised by gratitude. Let me be very clear. I have weighed it. I have considered every argument you made before you found the courage to speak them aloud. He took a step closer. And still I say this. Sending her away would be the greater danger. How? Another counselor demanded. If we cast out a healer who saved our heir, what message does that send to the packs? That we value fear over loyalty. That anyone who shows unusual strength will be punished, not guided. No one answered. And there is this, the king added. My nephew lives. He laughs. He will grow because she chose to break a vow that never should have been required of her. Any kingdom that cannot find room in its heart for that miracle is not one I wish to rule. A flush crept up Cassius's neck. You place great weight on one woman, he said. I place great weight on my own judgment, the king corrected, which, as you seem to require reminding, is what you are here to advise, not to replace. The words fell like stones into still water. If you say she stays, Cassius said carefully, we will obey. Mira stays, the king said. She will continue to care for my nephew and assist. Our healers, any who attempt to harass or isolate her, will answer to me directly. Are we clear? One by one, the counselors nodded. Then this hearing is over, the king concluded. He turned, his eyes finding mine at last. In them I saw no hint of regret, only a question. Are you all right? I managed to nod. As we stepped out of the chamber together, little Wolf barreled into my legs, whining in relief. I scooped him up, pressing my face into his fur to hide the wetness in my eyes. Over his head, the king's fingers brushed my elbow, a brief touch steadying. Thank you, I whispered. His mouth curved. You're the one who keeps saving lives. I am only catching up. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like something merely tolerated. I felt claimed, not as property, not as obligation, but as someone worth standing up for. The palace gardens were quieter than the halls. Crickets sang in the hedges. Water whispered over stone in the nearest fountain. I walked between rows of night-blooming flowers and tried to unknot the tangle in my chest. The hearing had ended hours ago, yet my pulse still echoed with every word. Dangerous, exile, unknown. And then the king's voice, calm and unshakable. Mira stays. I sank onto a stone bench beneath an arch of climbing roses. The more I replayed it, the more one truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I could not let him keep paying that price. You look like you're planning an escape. His voice came from the shadows, wry and gentle. I jumped, spinning on the bench. The king stepped into the moonlight, hands empty, expression unreadable. I didn't hear you, I said foolishly. That was the idea. He stopped a few paces away. I thought you might want a moment without walls listening. I came here to think, I admitted. Did it help? Yes. I drew a breath that tasted of roses and fear. It helped me decide I should leave. The words hung between us, sharp and sudden. His jaw tightened. Is that so? I'm causing too much trouble. Your council sees me as a threat. Other packs will too. Today, you silenced them. But how long before they decide your loyalty to me is a weakness to exploit? You listened to the same hearing I did, he said. Did you hear me say at any point that I considered you a burden? No, I whispered. But I heard what it cost you to keep me. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head almost in disbelief. You truly think leaving would make it easier? It wasn't a question. Yes. And what of my nephew? Will you take him with you when you go? Or leave him to cry himself sick again? Pain lanced through me. You know I wouldn't. Exactly. He stepped closer. You would haunt yourself with every whimper, every nightmare you weren't there to soothe. That might still be better than watching you risk your crown, I said, voice cracking. Silence stretched. The king closed the last of the distance between us. Stand up, he said softly. Why? Because I am tired of speaking down to you when we have this conversation. There was something in his tone that brooked no argument. I rose. We were close now, almost too close. I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. Listen to me, Mira, he said. My council's displeasure is not your sin to atone for. Their fear is not your debt to pay. I chose to stand in that chamber today. I would choose it again tomorrow. Why? The word tore out of me. Why keep choosing me when it would be so much easier not to? He looked at me as if the answer were the simplest thing in the world. Because somewhere between finding you in that forest cottage and watching you hold my nephew, as if the world could not touch him while he slept, he said, I fell in love with you. The garden went silent. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. You what? In love, he repeated with steady patience. Not because of your magic, though I have never seen anything more beautiful. Not because of some bond or prophecy. Because of you. He lifted a hand slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers brushed a damp curl from my cheek. I watched you risk exile's safety a second time to save a dying pup. I watched you sit up night after night so he would never wake alone. I watched you walk into that council chamber knowing they saw you as a threat and stand tall anyway. His thumb traced a line just below my jaw. You are compassionate and strong and stubbornly kind even when the world has not been kind to you. How could I not love you? My eyes burned. I know what you think, he went on, that you are an exile and I am a king, that there is a gulf between us too wide to cross. But when I look at you, I do not see your old council's verdict. I see the woman who reminded mine what justice looks like. He took my hand then carefully as if it were something fragile and precious. I am not here as your king tonight. I am here as a man asking a woman if she will allow him to court her properly, openly, at her pace. I searched his face for any sign of pressure, any hint of expectation edged with command. There was none, only hope, and a thread of fear so similar to my own it stole my breath. I won't bind you with rank or obligation, he promised. If you say no, you will still have a place here for as long as you wish it. His fingers tightened around mine, just once. But if you say yes, then I will spend every day proving that your trust is not a mistake. The moonlight blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had imagined many things in the lonely hours after exile. Never this. Never a king admitting his heart with the same steady conviction he brought to battle plans. I don't know if I can be what you deserve, I whispered. Then we will learn together, he said. I am still learning how to be a king who chooses compassion over convenience. Perhaps we make a fitting pair. A shaky laugh escaped me. Let me be clear, the king said. I am asking, Mira. Not demanding, not claiming. Asking. Will you give me the chance to earn your love? The choice lay before me like two paths in the moonlit garden. I thought of his voice in the council chamber, unwavering. Of his hands cradling his nephew. Of the way he had listened when I spoke of my magic, not with fear, but with genuine curiosity. Of the warmth that had been growing in my chest for weeks, fragile and persistent. Yes, I heard myself say, If you are still willing when I'm afraid and stubborn and certain I don't deserve you, then yes, you may court me." Relief broke across his face like sunrise. "Good," he murmured. He did not pull me into his arms. He only brought our joined hands to his lips and pressed a reverent kiss to my knuckles. "We will go slowly," he said. "On your terms." And we did. The months that followed reshaped the palace. The king and I worked side by side, expanding the healer's wing, opening its doors to wolves from smaller packs, inviting those with unusual gifts to train rather than hide. Little Wolf grew. He tumbled through council chambers, scattering papers and solemnity with equal ease. When he shifted for the first time, small and wobbly in his human skin, he ran straight to us, clutching my skirts with one hand and the king's tunic with the other. 6 months after the hearing, on a clear night when the stars spilled thick across the sky, the king led me back to the garden where he had first confessed. We stood beneath the arch of roses. "I made you a promise," the king said quietly, "that I would never mistake choice for fate." He cupped my face in his hands. "Mira," he whispered, "may I kiss you?" "Yes," I breathed. The first brush of his mouth against mine was not a claim. It was a vow, gentle, reverent, threaded with all the conversations and shared nights and quiet moments that had brought us here. I curled my fingers into his shoulders and felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat under my palms, matching my own. When we parted, foreheads resting together, the world felt both vast and achingly intimate. We did not build a life because destiny demanded it. We built it piece by deliberate piece, through choices made in council chambers and nurseries, in gardens and crowded halls. Little Wolf grew strong and happy, racing through the palace courtyards with other pups. His bond to me remained, a steady, comforting hum rather than a desperate tether. He became living proof that the night I broke my vow in a lonely cottage had not doomed anyone. It had saved us all. Sometimes when the court grew loud and the weight of my past pressed close, the king would take my hand and squeeze once, quietly reminding me, I was not here because of obligation. I was here because we had chosen one another again and again. And in the end, light and crowns and rumors aside, that choice turned out to be the most powerful magic of all.